a Beta's daughter told the Alpha King, "Sir, my mother has a mark just like yours." What happened next? "Do not look at it," the king growled, his voice a low tremor of thunder that shook the rain-slicked cobblestones. He yanked his cuff down, hiding the jagged silver scar branded into his forearm, the mark of a soul broken in half. The court fell silent. To look upon Alpha King, Desmond Hartwell's curse was to invite death. But the small, trembling girl in the mud didn't lower her eyes. She wiped a smear of dirt from her cheek, clutching a ragged doll, and whispered the words that would topple a kingdom. "But sir," Felicia Mossvale's voice was small, innocent, and terrifyingly clear in the silence. "My mother. She cries when she touches her arm. She has a mark just like yours. Right there." Desmond froze. The rain stopped. Or perhaps for the Alpha King, the world simply ceased to turn. The sky over the Whitland territory was the color of a fresh bruise, purple, swollen, and aching to burst. It suited Alpha King Desmond Hartwell's mood perfectly. He stood on the raised dais of the town square, the rain plastering his black hair to his forehead, dripping off the high collar of his military coat. He hated inspections. He hated the forced bowing, the scent of fear that soured the air, and the performative loyalty of the lesser packs. "They are terrified of you, my liege," Fergus Whitland murmured, stepping up beside him. Fergus was a good man, a loyal Beta with a jaw like a granite block, but even he kept a respectful distance. "You're leaking pheromones. It smells like ozone and impending violence out here." "I am bored, Fergus," Desmond replied, his eyes scanning the crowd of shivering villagers. "Boredom makes me agitated, and agitation makes me leak power. Try to contain it. We need the grain shipments from this sector. Scaring them into a coma won't help the harvest." Desmond sighed, a sound that rumbled in his chest like an idling engine. He was the alpha of alphas, the ruler of the Northern Coalition, and yet he felt less like a king and more like a ghost haunting his own throne. It had been 7 years. 7 years since the Night of Cinders. 7 years since he woke up with a burning pain in his arm, and a bond snapped clean in two. He had never found her, the woman the moon goddess had designed for him. He had only felt her death, a sudden, sharp void where a heartbeat should have been. Since then, the mark had appeared. A silver, jagged scar on his forearm, shaped like a crescent moon shattered by lightning. It throbbed when he was angry. It bled when he was lonely. "Bring the children forward," Gisena Redshaw commanded from the other side of the dais. Desmond's lip curled. Gisena, highborn, beautiful, and ambitious enough to strangle a bear. She had been vying for the spot of his queen for 3 years, banking on the fact that his fated mate was dead. She wore a dress of crimson silk that was entirely impractical for the weather, her lips painted a severe red. "Is this necessary, Gisena?" Desmond asked, watching the line of terrified orphans and school children shuffling forward to present flowers. "Optics, Desmond," she hissed, flashing a dazzling fake smile to the crowd. "The people need to see you as a protector, not just a warlord." The line moved. A boy gave him a wilted daisy. A girl curtsied so low she fell over. Desmond nodded mechanically, his mind drifting to the war reports waiting on his desk, back at the capital. Then there was a commotion. Near the back of the line, a small girl, no older than 6, was shoved by a larger boy. She stumbled, her oversized woolen coat tangling in her legs. She fell hard into the mud, right at the base of the stairs leading to the dais. The crowd gasped, the guards tensed. Desmond moved before he thought. In a blur of motion that the human eye couldn't track, he descended the stairs. He didn't like bullies, and he didn't like children crying. He crouched down, ignoring the mud soaking into his polished boots, and offered a hand. "Up you get, little one," he said, dialing back his alpha aura until it was just a warm hum. The girl looked up. She had messy brown curls and eyes the colour of polished amber, eyes that looked startlingly familiar, though he couldn't place why. She sniffled, clutching a dirty rag doll to her chest. I ruined my dress," she whispered. "It's just mud," Desmond said, surprisingly gently. He reached out to brush a speck of dirt from her shoulder. As he did, his coat sleeve rode up. The silver scar on his forearm pulsed, reacting to the proximity of something. It glowed faintly, a ghostly white light against his tan skin. The girl, Felicia, froze. Her eyes locked onto the mark. She didn't look away, even as Fergus and the guards stepped forward to usher her along. "Do not look at it," Desmond growled instinctively, the shame of his broken bond surfacing. He tried to pull his sleeve down, but Felicia didn't flinch. She tilted her head, her small brow furrowing. "But, sir—" The square went quiet. "My mother," Felicia said, pointing a small, muddy finger at the jagged crescent. "She cries when she touches her arm. She has a mark just like yours. Right there." The world tilted on its axis. Desmond stopped breathing. The air in his lungs turned to solid ice. He grabbed the girl's shoulder, perhaps too tightly for she squeaked, and pulled her closer. "What did you say?" he demanded, his voice a hoarse whisper. Jacena stepped forward, looking annoyed. "Desmond, let the child go. She's obviously making up stories to get attention." "Silence!" Desmond roared, the command slamming into the crowd with the force of a physical blow. Every wolf in the vicinity dropped to their knees, baring their throats in submission. Even Jacena stumbled back, clutching her chest. Desmond looked only at the child. His heart, a stone in his chest for 7 years, gave a painful, terrifying lurch. "Your mother," Desmond rasped. "Where is she?" Felicia pointed toward the dense, shadowed tree line of the Whispering Woods, the forbidden territory where the rogue wolves and the outcast betas lived. "She's at the cottage," Felicia said. "She's baking bread. But she told me never to tell anyone about the mark. She says it's a curse from a monster." "A monster?" Desmond stood up, the girl's words cutting deeper than any blade. He looked at Fergus. "Get the car," Desmond ordered, his eyes burning gold, the beast within him clawing at the surface. "No, forget the car." He stripped off his heavy military coat and threw it onto the muddy ground. "Desmond!" Jacena shrieked. "You cannot go into the Whispering Woods. It's unmapped. It's dangerous." "If she is there," Desmond said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "then the only dangerous thing in those woods is me." He shifted. Bones cracked and reshaped. Fur, black as midnight, sprouted from his skin. A massive wolf, easily the size of a warhorse, stood where the king had been. He let out a howl that shattered the windows of the nearby tavern, a sound of pure, agonizing hope. Then he ran. The woods were a blur of green and grey. Desmond ran with a speed that tore up the earth beneath his paws. He followed the scent the girl carried, flower, lavender, and beneath it all, a scent he hadn't smelled in 7 years, vanilla and rain. It was faint, buried under years of masking herbs, but it was there. His wolf was going insane, howling inside his mind. Mate. Mate. Alive. Found. He bypassed the trails, crashing through thickets of thorns that would have flayed a lesser wolf. He didn't feel the scratches. He only felt the pull of the bond, a magnetic force dragging him toward the center of the forest. He slowed as he approached a clearing. A small, crooked cottage sat there, smoke curling lazily from a stone chimney. It was humble, almost falling apart, with a small garden of herbs struggling against the encroaching weeds. Desmond shifted back to human form behind a large oak tree. He was naked, but he didn't care. He summoned the partial shift, allowing trousers to manifest from the mist of his transformation, an old alpha trick, but his chest remained bare, heaving with exertion. The rain hissed against his hot skin. He walked toward the door. Every step was a battle between the urge to kick the door down and the terrified fear that it was a mistake, that the girl had lied, that it was just a similar scar. He reached the heavy wooden door. He didn't knock. He placed his hand against the wood and pushed. It was unlocked. The inside was warm, smelling of yeast and dried sage. A fire crackled in the hearth. A woman stood with her back to him, kneading dough at a rough-hewn table. She wore a simple, shapeless grey dress, her hair tied up in a messy bun. "Felicia," she called out without turning, her voice weary but melodic. "Did you forget your lunch again? I told you not to go near the—" She stopped. The air in the room changed. It became heavy, charged with static. The connection between them, dormant for 7 years, suddenly slammed into place like a dislocated shoulder being reset. The woman dropped the dough. Her hands began to tremble. Slowly, agonizingly, she turned around. Desmond felt his knees weaken. It was her. Helene Crestbrook. She was older. There were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, and a shadow of deep, enduring exhaustion in her posture. But it was her. The beta woman he had fallen in love with at the academy. The woman who had vanished the night he was to claim her. "Helene," he breathed, her face drained of all color. She didn't look at him with love. She didn't run into his arms. She looked at him with pure, unadulterated terror. Her hand shot to the counter, grabbing a serrated bread knife. She held it out, the tip shaking. "Stay back," she whispered. "Stay back, Desmond." Desmond halted, confused and hurt. "Helene, it's me. I found you. Why did you run? Why—" "Don't play games," she screamed, tears spilling over. "You sent them. You sent the assassins 7 years ago. Do you want to finish the job yourself? Is that it? Did you come to kill me and Felicia personally?" Desmond blinked, the accusation hitting him like a physical blow. "Kill you? Helene, I searched for you for years. I almost died when the bond broke. I thought you were dead. Liar!" She pulled up the sleeve of her dress. There, on her forearm, was the twin to his mark, a jagged, silver crescent. But hers looked raw, angry, surrounded by burned tissue, as if she had tried to sear it off. "You rejected me," she sobbed, backing away until she hit the stone hearth. "You rejected me in absentia. You sent your advisor, Eamon. He told me. He told me you didn't want a weak beta as your queen. He told me to run or I would be executed." Desmond's blood ran cold. Eamon Ashmere, his oldest friend, his father's advisor, the man who had held Desmond while he wept over Helene's empty room 7 years ago. "Eamon told you that?" Desmond asked, his voice deadly quiet. "He gave me a head start," Helene said, gripping the knife tighter. "He said if I ever showed my face, you would mount my head on the castle walls." Desmond took a step forward, ignoring the knife. "Helene, look at me." "No." "Look at me." She flinched, her amber eyes meeting his gold ones. "I never rejected you," Desmond vowed, the truth ringing in the small cottage. "I have not slept a full night in 7 years. I have not touched another woman. I have torn the kingdom apart looking for a corpse, and now that I find you alive, you think I want to kill you?" He held out his arm, showing his own mark. "It hurts, Helene," he whispered. "It has hurt every day since you left." Helene's grip on the knife loosened, confusion warred with fear in her eyes. "But Eamon said—" "Eamon lied," Desmond said, "and I am going to tear his throat out for it." He took another step. "And Felicia? The girl in the square? She is mine." Helene's breath hitched. She instinctively moved a hand to her stomach, a protective gesture. She is a beta. Like me. She has no wolf. She is useless to an Alpha King. She is my daughter, Desmond said, his voice cracking. Is she not? Helene hesitated, then nodded slowly. She was born 8 months after I ran. Desmond closed his eyes, a tear tracking through the grime on his face. He had a daughter. He had a mate, and they had been living in squalor, terrified of him because of a traitor in his own court. We have to go, Desmond said, opening his eyes. It's not safe here. If Felicia spoke in the square, word will get back to the capital, to Aemon, to Gisena. I'm not going with you, Helene said, though the knife lowered completely. I won't bring her into that viper's nest. You don't have a choice, Desmond said, moving fast. He gently took the knife from her hand and tossed it aside. He grabbed her hands, calloused, rough, warm. The spark that jumped between them was electric, intoxicating. Helene gasped, her pupils blowing wide. They will come for you tonight, Desmond said urgently. We have to move, now. Before Helene could argue, the front door burst open. It wasn't Fergus. 3 wolves in dark tactical gear, masks covering their faces, stood in the doorway. They weren't Royal Guard. They were mercenaries. King Desmond, the leader sneered, his voice muffled. We didn't expect to find you here so soon. Lord Aemon sends his regards. The cottage felt suddenly very small. Desmond didn't shift. In a confined space, a full wolf transformation was a liability. He would crush Helene and the furniture before he could fight. Instead, he let the partial shift ripple through him. Claws elongated from his human fingers, turning into obsidian hooks. His canines lengthened. His eyes began to glow with a radioactive intensity. Get behind me, Desmond ordered Helene. His voice was no longer human. It was a dual-tone growl, the man and the beast speaking in unison. Helene didn't argue. She scrambled back, grabbing a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. She wasn't a warrior, but she was a mother, and that made her dangerous in her own right. The first mercenary lunged. He was fast, a tracker wolf, wielding a silver-tipped spear. Desmond caught the spear shaft with his bare hand. Smoke hissed where the silver touched his skin, but he didn't flinch. With a savage twist, he snapped the wood like a dry twig. He yanked the mercenary forward by his tactical vest and drove a knee into the wolf's chest. Ribs shattered with the sound of gunshots. Desmond tossed the body aside, as if it were a rag doll. Is that all Aemon could afford? Desmond taunted, stepping over the groaning body. I'm insulted. The other 2 hesitated. They had expected a grieving, confused king. They had found a god of war. Kill the woman, the second mercenary shouted, diving past Desmond. No, Desmond roared. He wasn't fast enough. The mercenary was a blur of motion, aiming a serrated dagger at Helene's throat. Helene didn't scream. She swung the iron poker with all her strength. It connected with the mercenary's temple with a sickening crunch. The wolf staggered, stunned just long enough. Desmond was on him in a second. He grabbed the attacker by the back of the neck and threw him through the cottage window, glass shattering outward into the rain. The third mercenary turned to run, realizing the contract was a suicide mission. Desmond didn't let him leave. He grabbed a heavy wooden chair and hurled it. It smashed into the fleeing wolf's legs, sending him sprawling. Desmond was upon him, his hand clamped around the man's throat, lifting him off the ground. Who else knows? Desmond demanded, squeezing just enough to cut off air but not life. Only Lord Aemon, the mercenary wheezed, clawing uselessly at Desmond's arm. And Lady Gisena. Desmond's jaw tightened. Gisena. She paid for the equipment. Aemon paid for the silence. Desmond snapped the man's neck. It was a mercy compared to what he wanted to do. He dropped the body and turned to Helene. She was standing by the hearth, chest heaving, the iron poker still gripped in white-knuckled hands. She looked at the carnage in her kitchen. The blood, the broken glass, the dead men. Then she looked at Desmond. "You killed them," she whispered. "They were going to kill you," Desmond said, his chest heaving as the adrenaline crashed. He tried to retract his claws, wiping the blood on his trousers. "Helene, are you hurt?" She dropped the poker. No, I'm fine." She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. She saw the rage, yes, but she also saw the desperation, the way he positioned himself between her and the door, the way his hands shook, not from fear, but from the effort of not touching her. "You really didn't know," she said softly. "You didn't know I was here." "I would have burned the world to find you," Desmond said. "You have to believe me." A small sound came from the doorway. Felicia stood there, soaked to the bone, Fergus Whitland standing protectively behind her. Fergus looked at the dead bodies, then at the king, then at Helene. His eyes widened. "By the goddess," Fergus breathed. "Helene." "Fergus!" Helene nodded, her voice cracking. Felicia ran into the room, ignoring the blood, and launched herself at her mother's legs. "Mommy, the big man, the king, he ran so fast." Helene scooped her daughter up, burying her face in the girl's damp curls. She looked at Desmond over Felicia's shoulder. The fear was fading, replaced by a steely resolve. "We can't stay here," Helene said. "Aemon will send more. Better ones." "We are going to the palace," Desmond said. "No," Helene shook her head. "That's where he is strongest. That's where Gesina is. If we walk in the front door, they'll poison us before dinner." "I am the king," Desmond growled. "I command—" "You are a king surrounded by snakes," Helene cut him off. "If you want to keep us alive, Desmond, you have to think like a beta, not an alpha. You can't just claw your way out of this." Desmond paused. She was right. He had been blind for 7 years. "What do you suggest?" he asked, submitting to her judgment. "We go back," Helene said, "but not as your mate, and not as your daughter." Desmond frowned. "What?" "I am the new head of the laundry staff," Helene said, her mind working fast. "Hired from the local village. Felicia is my assistant. We hide in plain sight. We enter the viper's nest, and we watch Aemon and Gesena. We find proof of their treason. And then—" her eyes hardened, the amber turning to cold gold. "And then you kill them," she finished. Desmond looked at this woman, this fierce, broken, brilliant woman, and felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "Agreed," Desmond said. He walked over, reaching out a hand. He didn't grab her. He waited. Slowly, Helene reached out. Her fingers brushed his. The spark flared again, warm and healing. "But there is one condition," Desmond said softly. "What?" "You stay in my chambers. I will sleep on the floor if I must. But I am not letting you out of my sight again." Helene looked at his scar, then at hers. She nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Take us home, Desmond." As they walked out of the cottage, stepping over the wreckage of their past, the rain stopped. But in the distance, thunder rumbled. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The royal palace of the Northern Coalition was not just a home. It was a fortress of black stone and stained glass, looming over the capital like a brooding gargoyle. To the public, it was a symbol of strength. To Helene Crestbrook, staring up at it from the back of an unmarked supply truck, it was a mausoleum. "Remember," she whispered to Felicia, adjusting the scratchy woolen collar of the girl's servant tunic. "You must never look Lady Gesina in the eye. You must never speak to the king unless he speaks to you first. And he won't, not in public. And your name is Lottie. Can you say that?" "Lottie," Felicia repeated, clutching her rag doll. The doll, too, had been given a disguise, a new, rough patch sewn over its eye to make it look less like the one the king had seen in the square. "But Daddy, the king, he said I was a princess." "In here," Helene tapped the girl's chest. "You are a princess. Out there, you are Lottie, the laundry girl's daughter. It's a game, sweetie, a very important game of hide-and-seek." The truck rumbled to a halt at the service entrance. The rain had ceased, leaving the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt and pine. Desmond, King Desmond, was nowhere to be seen. He had ridden ahead in his official vehicle, entering through the main gates with fanfare and sirens. They had agreed on this separation. It tore at him. Helene had seen the muscle jumping in his jaw when he left them with Fergus, but it was necessary. Fergus Whitland, now dressed in plain clothes, opened the back of the truck. "We're here. Keep your heads down. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, is on our side. But she thinks you're a distant relative of mine fleeing an abusive pack. She doesn't know who you really are." Helene nodded, taking a deep breath. She grabbed her meager bundle of belongings and stepped out. The kitchens were a chaotic symphony of clanging pots and shouting chefs. No one spared a second glance at the woman in the grey dress and the small child trailing behind her. They were invisible. Just more gears in the machine. They were led down winding stone corridors, deeper into the bowels of the castle, until the air grew humid and smelled of lye soap and steam. The laundry wing. "This is it," Fergus muttered, opening a small door. The room was tiny, a converted storage closet with 2 narrow cots pushed against the wall. It was a far cry from the opulent chambers Helene would have occupied as queen, but it was clean. "Desmond's private elevator is down the hall, behind the tapestry of the Great Hunt," Fergus whispered. "He expects you at midnight. Do not be late, and for the love of the goddess, don't get caught." The first few hours were a blur of steam and scalding water. Helene, now known as Ilara, was put to work immediately by a formidable woman with forearms the size of hams. She scrubbed sheets until her knuckles were raw, the physical pain a welcome distraction from the terror gnawing at her gut. Felicia sat in the corner, folding napkins with clumsy precision. She was quiet, her eyes darting around the room, taking everything in. "You there? New girl!" The voice cracked through the steam like a whip. Helene froze. She knew that voice. High, imperious, and dripping with disdain. Lady Gisena Redshaw stood in the doorway. She looked immaculate in a white pantsuit, her red lips curved into a sneer. She was holding a silk blouse, one of Desmond's, that was stained with ink. "I was told we had new help," Gisena said, stepping into the room. The other laundresses curtsied low, terrified. Helene lowered her head, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "This shirt!" Gisena threw it at Helene. It landed with a wet slap on the washboard. "It is the king's favourite. Get the stain out. If you ruin the silk, I'll have you whipped in the courtyard." Helene stared at the shirt. She recognized it. She had bought it for Desmond for his birthday 8 years ago. He still wore it? "Did you hear me, Mute?" Gisena stepped closer, her perfume, overpowering rose and musk, filling Helene's nose. "Yes, my lady," Helene rasped, disguising her voice. She didn't look up. Gisena paused. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "Do I know you?" Helene stopped breathing. She gripped the washboard, her knuckles turning white. If Gisena recognized her scent. But beta scents were subtle, easily masked by the heavy smell of lye and bleach permeating the room. And Helene was thinner, older, worn down by 7 years of poverty. "I'm from the Whitland territories, my lady," Helene said, keeping her head bowed. "I have never been to the capital." Gisena stared at the top of her head for a long, agonizing second. Then she scoffed. "Pathetic. Just clean the shirt. And wash your child. She smells like a wet dog." Gisena spun on her heel and marched out. Helene let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She looked at Felicia. The girl's eyes were wide, filled with tears. "I don't like her," Felicia whispered. "Me neither, baby," Helene murmured, scrubbing the ink from Desmond's shirt with a ferocity that threatened to tear the fabric. "Me neither." Midnight in the palace was a time of ghosts. The corridors were silent, save for the rhythmic patrol of the guards. Helene moved through the shadows, Felicia asleep in her arms. She found the tapestry of the Great Hunt, a gruesome depiction of wolves taking down a stag, and slipped behind it. The hidden elevator was there, just as Fergus had said. It required a bioscan, but Desmond must have programmed her into the system remotely, because the doors slid open the moment she touched the panel. They rose to the top floor, the Alpha's wing. The doors opened directly into Desmond's private quarters. The room was vast, dominated by a wall of glass that overlooked the sleeping city. A fire burned low in the hearth. Desmond was pacing. He was shirtless, his back a map of old scars, the new jagged mark on his forearm glowing faintly in the dim light. When the doors opened, he spun around. The relief on his face was so profound it hurt to look at. "Helene!" he breathed. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He didn't care that she smelled of lye and sweat. He pulled her and the sleeping Felicia into his arms, burying his face in Helene's neck. He inhaled deeply, the tension in his shoulders finally snapping. "I hate this," he growled against her skin. "I hate knowing you are down there, in the filth, while that witch orders you around." "I saw the report. She made you wash my shirt?" "It's a good disguise, Desmond," Helene whispered, leaning into his warmth. "No one looks at the help." He pulled back, taking Felicia from her arms and gently laying the child on the massive silk-covered bed. He tucked her in with a tenderness that belied his lethal nature. Then he turned back to Helene. "Did you find anything?" Helene sat on the edge of the bed, her exhaustion catching up to her. "Not yet. But the laundry tells stories. I found Eamon's tunic in the urgent pile today. It smelled of sulphur and aconite." Desmond's eyes darkened. "Aconite. Wolfsbane." "Processed wolfsbane," Helene corrected. "The kind used in subtle poisons. Not enough to kill an alpha instantly, but enough to weaken him, to make him slow, irritable, cloudy." Desmond looked at his own hands. "I have felt tired. For months. I thought it was the depression, the bond sickness." "He's poisoning you, Desmond," Helene said, her voice trembling. "Slowly, so that when you finally die, it looks like natural causes. Like grief took you." Desmond slammed his fist into the wall. The plaster cracked. "I trusted him. He was my father's beta." "Power changes people," Helene said softly. She stood up and walked to him, placing her hand over his fist. "We need proof. A tunic smelling of herbs isn't enough to execute a high advisor." "I have a council meeting tomorrow," Desmond said, his jaw tight. "Eamon will be there. Gisena will be there." "I'll be there too," Helene said. Desmond looked at her sharply. "No, it's too dangerous. I'm serving the refreshments," she said. "Mrs. Gable assigned me." "I'll be in the room, Desmond. I can watch them when they think no one is looking. People say things in front of servants they would never say to a king. If Gisena recognizes you—" "She didn't today," Helene said. "She was too busy looking at herself." Desmond sighed, pulling her close again. His hand traced the line of her spine. "I want to claim you, Helene. I want to mark you so the whole world knows you are mine. I want to rip Eamon apart and bathe in his blood." "Patience, my wolf," she whispered, her fingers tangling in his dark hair. "First we survive. Then we conquer." They didn't sleep much that night. They lay together on the bed, fully clothed, Felicia between them, a small island of innocence in a sea of danger. Desmond held Helene's hand, his thumb tracing the scar on her arm, over and over, as if trying to erase the 7 years of pain it represented. The council chamber was a circular room of polished mahogany and gold. The air conditioning was set too high, chilling the sweat on Helene's back. She wore the stiff black uniform of the serving staff, a white cap pulled low over her brow. She held a heavy silver tray laden with crystal goblets and a pitcher of wine. The High Council was seated, 12 of the most powerful wolves in the coalition. At the head of the table sat Desmond, looking regal and terrifyingly bored. To his right sat Aemon Ashmere. Aemon was an older wolf, his hair silver at the temples, his face lined with what looked like wisdom, but was actually treachery. He smiled genially at the other council members. Gisena sat further down, not a council member but present as the representative of the merchant guilds. She tapped her long, manicured fingernails on the table, looking impatient. "The grain shipments from the south are delayed again," Aemon was saying, his voice smooth as oil. "Rebel activity, they say. We may need to increase the military presence there." "Or perhaps we should stop taxing them into starvation," Desmond drawled, swirling the water in his glass. He looked tired. Helene noticed the slight grey tinge to his skin under the harsh lights. The poison was working. "Strength is the only language they understand, my liege," Aemon countered gently. "Weakness invites rebellion." Helene moved forward to refill the glasses. She started with the minor lords, working her way up the table. Her heart pounded so hard she feared the tray would rattle. As she reached Gisena, the woman didn't even look up. "More wine, and be careful this time." Helene poured. As she did, she noticed something. Gisena's phone was sitting on the table, face up. A message flashed on the screen. "Target is weakening. Phase 2 tonight. The package is in the laundry chute." Helene's hand slipped. A single drop of red wine splashed onto the polished table. "You clumsy oaf!" Gisena shrieked, jumping up. She backhanded Helene across the face. The slap echoed in the silent room. Helene stumbled back, dropping the pitcher. It shattered, red wine spreading across the floor like blood. Desmond was out of his chair in a flash. A low, vibrating growl started in his chest. His eyes flashed gold. He looked ready to tear Gisena's head off. "Desmond!" Aemon stood up, placing a restraining hand on the king's arm. "It's just a clumsy servant. Control yourself. Your aura is crushing us." Desmond froze. He looked at Helene, who was clutching her cheek, eyes wide with warning. "Don't," she mouthed. "Not yet." Desmond forced himself to sit, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so hard the wood splintered. "Get her out of here," Desmond said, his voice flat and dead. "And clean up this mess." "I'll handle her discipline personally," Gisena hissed, reaching for Helene's arm. "No," Desmond commanded. "She is dismissed. Fergus, escort her to the kitchens." Fergus stepped out of the shadows, his face pale. He grabbed Helene's arm, not gently, playing his part. "Come with me." As Fergus dragged her out of the room, Helene's mind was racing. "Phase 2 tonight. The package is in the laundry chute. They didn't go to the kitchens." Once they were in the hallway, Fergus pulled her into an alcove. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently. "The king nearly shifted right there. I thought he was going to kill her." "I'm fine," Helene said, ignoring the stinging in her cheek. "Fergus, you have to get Desmond. Now." "Why?" "I saw a message on Gisena's phone. Phase 2 is tonight, and there's a package in the laundry chute." Fergus swore. "The main laundry chute? That leads to the incinerator room, but there's a bypass. We have to get to it before they do," Helene said. "Whatever is in that package is the proof we need, or the weapon that kills him." "I can't leave the king," Fergus said. "If Phase 2 is tonight." "Then I'll go," Helene said. "You can't. It's dangerous." "I'm the laundry maid, remember?" Helene gave a grim smile. "I belong in the laundry. Go guard Desmond. Don't let him eat or drink anything." She turned and ran, her servant's shoes slipping on the marble floors. She had to get to the basement. She took the service stairs, descending 2 at a time. The air grew hotter, the smell of refuse and burning trash growing stronger. The laundry chute system was a network of massive pipes that fed into the lower levels. She reached the sorting room. It was empty at this hour. The huge metal mouth of the chute hung open. She heard voices. She dove behind a cart of dirty linens. 2 men walked in. One was Eamon Ashmere. The other was a guard she didn't recognize. "Is it prepped?" Eamon asked, his voice echoing in the concrete room. "Yes, my lord," the guard said. He held up a small metallic canister. "The gas is concentrated. Once we release it into the ventilation system, it will fill the royal wing in 3 minutes, odorless, colorless. And the king? He'll never wake up. Cardiac arrest. Tragic." "Good," Eamon smiled, and it was the smile of a demon. "And the beta woman, and her brat. Have the sweepers found them?" "Not yet, but they can't have gone far." Helene clamped a hand over her mouth. Gas. They weren't just poisoning him anymore. They were going to gas the entire royal wing tonight. Desmond, Felicia. She had to warn them. She shifted her weight to creep away. Her foot hit a metal bucket. Clang. The sound was deafening. Eamon spun around. "Who's there?" Helene didn't wait. She bolted. "Get her!" Eamon roared. She ran through the maze of carts and machinery, her lungs burning. She heard heavy boots pounding behind her. She burst through the double doors into the main corridor of the basement levels. She needed a weapon. She needed help. She needed Desmond. She turned a corner and skidded to a halt. Blocked. A dead end. Just a wall of pipes and a locked maintenance door. She turned around. The guard was there, blocking the hallway. He pulled a stun baton from his belt, the tip crackling with blue electricity. Eamon walked up behind him, looking annoyed. He squinted at Helene in the dim light. Then his eyes went wide. "Well, well," Eamon whispered, a cruel delight spreading across his face. "I thought you were a ghost, Helene. But ghosts don't bleed when you slap them." He signaled the guard. "Kill her, and make it messy." The guard lunged, the stun baton crackling with a lethal blue arc. Helene didn't scream. She didn't freeze. Beta she might be, but she was a mother whose child was sleeping 3 floors above a gas canister. She dropped. The baton swung over her head, humming through the air where her skull had been a second before. Helene scrambled forward on her hands and knees, driving her shoulder into the guard's knees. It wasn't a warrior's move. It was desperate, clumsy, and effective. The guard, top-heavy with tactical gear, buckled. "You little rat!" Eamon snarled, stepping over his fallen henchman. He didn't need a weapon. He was an elder wolf. His hand shot out, grabbing Helene by her hair and yanking her up. Pain exploded in her scalp. Eamon slammed her against the hot, vibrating pipes of the wall. "You should have stayed dead, Helene," Eamon hissed, his face inches from hers. "You ruined everything. The king was broken, controlled. He was mine. He was never yours," Helene gasped, her hand scrabbling behind her back, searching the pipes. "He is the alpha of alphas. You're just a leech." Eamon laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "And you are just a corpse." He tightened his grip on her throat. Black spots danced in Helene's vision. She could feel her windpipe compressing. "Desmond!" she screamed in her mind, projecting the thought with every ounce of love and terror she possessed. "Desmond!" 3 floors up, in the council chamber, King Desmond dropped his glass. It didn't shatter. It turned to dust in his hand. "My liege?" a minor lord asked, trembling. Desmond stood up. The table, solid oak, 3 inches thick, flipped over with a crash that shook the room. His eyes were no longer gold. They were bleeding into a crimson red. The bond, fully reawakened, was screaming. Helene, pain, suffocation. "Fergus!" Desmond roared, the sound shattering the windows of the chamber. "Basement, now!" He didn't wait for the elevator. He ran to the balcony and jumped. Back in the basement, Helene's fingers found what she was looking for. A release valve. It was painted red. Danger. High-pressure steam. She didn't hesitate. With the last of her strength, she twisted the wheel. A jet of superheated steam exploded from the pipe, right into Aemon's face. The advisor shrieked, dropping Helene as he clawed at his scalded skin. The narrow corridor instantly filled with a blinding, white fog. Helene fell to the wet concrete, coughing, crawling away from the heat. "I will kill you!" Aemon screamed from the mist, shifting. She heard the crack of bones, the tear of fabric. The guard was back on his feet, swinging the baton blindly in the steam. Helene found the maintenance door, locked. She was trapped in the fog with a shifting monster and an armed soldier. She curled into a ball, grabbing a discarded wrench from the floor. "I love you, Felicia. I love you, Desmond." Then, the ceiling collapsed. It wasn't a structural failure, it was an arrival. Desmond Hartwell crashed through the concrete floor above, landing in a crouch amidst a shower of debris and dust. He was fully shifted, a massive, midnight black wolf with fur that seemed to absorb the light. He let out a snarl that vibrated in Helene's very bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was a physical force. The guard pissed himself. He dropped the baton and ran. Desmond didn't even look at him. He swiped a massive paw, and the guard was thrown into the far wall, crumpling like a paper cup. The steam cleared enough to reveal Aemon, now a large grey wolf, missing patches of fur from the steam burns. He looked small compared to the Alpha King. Desmond didn't attack immediately. He stepped over Helene, placing his massive body between her and Aemon. He looked down at her, nudging her cheek with his wet nose. "I'm okay," she whispered, clutching his fur. "The gas. Aemon has the gas canister. It's for the vents." Desmond turned back to Aemon. The growl that came next was low, guttural, and promised an eternity of suffering. Aemon's wolf whined. He backed up, realizing too late that there is no bargaining with a force of nature. The fight was brutal and short. Aemon lunged, going for Desmond's throat, but Desmond was younger, stronger, and fueled by 7 years of repressed rage. He caught Aemon mid-air, his jaws clamping down on the traitor's shoulder. Bone crunched. Aemon howled. Desmond slammed him into the floor, the impact cracking the foundation. He didn't kill him. Not yet. He dragged the whimpering grey wolf across the concrete and threw him toward the double doors. Desmond shifted back to human form. He was naked, covered in dust and blood, but he looked like a god of vengeance. "Get up," Desmond commanded. "Shift back." Aemon, broken and bleeding, forced his body to return to human form. He lay shivering on the cold floor, clutching his shattered shoulder. "Mercy, Desmond," Aemon wheezed. "I raised you." "You poisoned me," Desmond said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You tried to murder my mate. You tried to gas my daughter." Desmond walked over and picked up the metallic canister that had rolled into the corner. He weighed it in his hand. "Is this it?" Aemon nodded frantically. Desmond handed the canister to Helene. "Keep this safe." He grabbed Aemon by the back of his neck and dragged him toward the service elevator. "We are going upstairs. The council is still in session. It's time they saw the true face of their advisor." "And Gisenna?" Helene asked, limping after them. "Gisenna is waiting for the signal to release the gas," Desmond said darkly. "Let's give her a signal." They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened on the main floor, the guards gasped. Their king, naked and blooded, dragging the High Advisor like a sack of trash, with a laundry maid trailing behind, holding a chemical weapon. "My king!" The captain of the guard rushed forward, throwing his cloak over Desmond's shoulders. "Secure the exits," Desmond barked. "No one leaves the banquet hall, especially not Lady Gisenna." They marched to the great double doors of the hall. Desmond kicked them open. The room went silent. Gisenna was standing near the head of the table, looking at her phone, frowning. When she saw Aemon broken on the floor, her face went white. "Desmond," she stammered. What happened? An intruder? Desmond threw Eamon to the floor in the center of the room. He pointed a finger at Gisena. You, he said. Me? Gisena laughed nervously. I don't understand. Helene, Desmond said. Show them. Helene stepped forward. She was dirty, bruised, and wearing a torn servant's uniform. But she held her head high. She placed the canister on the table. This is concentrated cyanide gas, Helene announced, her voice ringing clear. It was meant for the ventilation system of the royal wing. Tonight. Gasps rippled through the room. Lies, Gisena shrieked. She's a lying servant. Look at her. She is not a servant, Desmond said, walking to Helene's side. He took her hand and raised it. He rolled up her sleeve, revealing the jagged crescent mark. Then he rolled up his own. The marks glowed in unison, a blinding silver light that forced the council members to look away. She is my fated mate, Desmond declared. She is your queen. Gisena stumbled back, hitting a chair. Impossible. She's dead. Eamon said she was dead. I lied. Eamon groaned from the floor, coughing up blood. I told her to run, so I could control him. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Desmond looked at Gisena. You wanted to be queen so badly you were willing to gas a child? My child? I did it for the kingdom, Gisena cried, tears streaming down her face. You were weak, distracted by a ghost. We needed strong leadership. You are not strong, Desmond said softly. You are just cruel. He turned to the guards. Take them, the dungeons, the deepest cells. No, Gisena screamed as the guards grabbed her. I am highborn. You can't do this. I am the king, Desmond said, turning his back on her. I can do whatever I want. As they were dragged away, kicking and screaming, the room remained silent. Desmond looked at the council members. They all dropped to one knee, heads bowed low. Desmond didn't care about them. He turned to Helene. He cupped her bruised face in his hands. Are you hurt? I'm fine, she smiled, tears finally spilling over. We did it. Where is Felicia? Desmond asked. Asleep, Helene said. Under the bed, with her doll. Desmond picked Helene up in his arms, ignoring the gasp from the court. Let's go get our daughter, he said. I believe she was promised a castle. 3 days later, the sun finally broke through the clouds over the Whitland territory. The palace was different. The air was lighter. The heavy curtains had been pulled back, letting light flood the stone corridors. The staff moved with a spring in their step. The tyrant Eamon was gone. And the new queen. Well, the new queen knew their names. She knew how hard the laundry was. She knew which steps were slippery. Helene stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, wearing a dress of soft gold silk that Desmond had commissioned overnight. It fit her perfectly, hiding the bruises that were already fading. She watched Felicia playing in the royal gardens below. The girl was chasing butterflies, her laughter drifting up on the breeze. Fergus was down there too, acting as a very serious, very muscular babysitter. She looks happy, a deep voice said behind her. Helene leaned back into Desmond's chest as he wrapped his arms around her waist. He smelled of sandalwood and rain. No more wolfsbane. His skin was warm, his strength returning tenfold now that the poison was out of his system. She is happy, Helene said. She asked me this morning if she has to go back to being Lottie. Never, Desmond murmured, kissing the spot where her neck met her shoulder. She is Princess Felicia Hartwell, and you are Queen Helene. It feels strange, Helene admitted. Everyone bowing. They bow because they respect you, Desmond said, turning her around to face him. You saved the king. You saved the kingdom. You fought a guard with a wrench. Helene laughed. I was terrified. That's what makes it bravery, Desmond said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I never got to do this properly, he said. 7 years ago, I had a ring. I threw it into the river the day I thought you died." He opened the box. Inside sat a ring of braided gold, set with a rare amber stone that matched her eyes perfectly. "I had the jeweler work for 48 hours straight," Desmond grinned sheepishly. "Helene Crestbrook, will you let me mark you? Will you let me claim you? Will you rule by my side, not as a beta, but as my equal?" Helene looked at the ring, then at the man who had torn the world apart to find her, the man who had slept on the floor beside her, the man who loved their daughter. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Alpha." Desmond slid the ring onto her finger. Then he leaned down and claimed her lips in a kiss that tasted of freedom, of future, and of a love that had survived the fire. Below them, in the garden, Felicia stopped running. She looked up at the balcony and waved, and for the first time in a decade, the Northern Coalition was at peace. Desmond and Helene's reign became the stuff of legend. They didn't rule with an iron fist, but with a balance of alpha strength and beta wisdom. They rewrote the laws, dismantling the prejudices that had separated the ranks for centuries. Aemon and Gisena were never seen again, their names fading into cautionary tales told to ambitious pups who forgot that true power comes from loyalty, not treachery. Felicia grew up to be a fierce leader in her own right, proving that the heart of a wolf isn't determined by the shift, but by the spirit. In the end, it wasn't the crown that made Desmond a king. It was the little girl in the mud, and the woman with the scar who refused to stay broken. Lesson: true strength isn't about how loud you can roar, but about who you are willing to protect when the silence falls. Love, when fought for, is the only power that can break a curse. If you enjoyed this story of lost love, suspense, and royal redemption, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales from the pack.